In Chapter 17, we're going to continue our discussion on probability, but we're going to introduce two new models to handle particular situations. And my experience has been that people tend to have an easier go of this after Chapter 16 because it's pretty straightforward how the questions are going to present themselves. The only detail you really need to pay attention to is whether we're looking for something to occur on a particular trial or on by a particular trial or after. But we'll talk more about that in person. What we're dealing with in this section, in this chapter, are going to be what are called Bernoulli trials. And don't let the name intimidate you. They're really not that big of a deal. Basically, we're dealing with situations. If they can be classified as Bernoulli trials, then they're situations where we can, one, break the outcomes into two possible situations: success and failure. Now, success is a bit of a misnomer, as is failure. When we're talking about success and failure, we're really saying we found what we're looking for or we didn't. Sometimes people get confused when they hear success and failure and equate the positive outcome with a success, where that might not be. We might actually be looking for an outcome that would not be qualified as a success, but that's what we're looking for. So the two possible outcomes are we found what we're looking for or we didn't. So that's condition number one. The probability of success remains constant. It doesn't change as we go from trial to trial. So it's a coin toss. Coin tosses are a great basic introduction to a lot of probability things. These are no different when we're talking about a coin toss. And let's keep track of how many times it comes up heads. Well, that's it. Either it does or it doesn't. And the probability of it coming up heads is going to remain constant from trial to trial. And then lastly, the trials are independent. In the case of a coin toss, that's easy because the one outcome doesn't necessarily change the likelihood of the subsequent outcomes. But sometimes we're gonna go back to our cereal box example where we had athletic cards, trading cards in them, and we had certain percentages for certain athletes and so on and so forth. Well, in that one, that's a situation where technically, if you find, say, a Tiger Woods card, that's one less Tiger Woods trading card that's out there. So in theory, we should be changing the likelihood of getting another one because, well, we've taken one out of circulation. It doesn't have to change it much, but it wouldn't be necessarily the same. And that's a very real situation where it's not uncommon for that to happen. For by one thing happening, it's going to change ever so slightly the likelihood of it happening again. We have a workaround for that. And this is a condition that's going to show itself a lot from here on out in this course. And it's called the 10% condition. And basically what that is giving us is an okay to proceed with things as if they are independent, so long as the sample size is less than 10% of the population. Essentially what that is saying is we know it's going to affect the probability on some level, but so long as it's less than 10% of the population, it's not big enough. It's not a big enough difference to say so. It's not going to affect it so greatly that we're going to have to be worried about it. And that 10% condition is something you do want to check and you do want to speak to, especially when you're taking that AP test, right? So the three conditions that make any sort of trial a Bernoulli trial are there are only two possible outcomes, success and failure, or we found what we're looking for or we didn't. The probability of success remains constant. It doesn't change as you work through the trials. And the trials themselves are independent within reason. As so long as they're meeting that 10% condition, we should be okay. That's really part one in this chapter of that's lecture one of the lectures from chapter 17, just identifying Bernoulli trials. On page 401, there you can try two different problems. So once you've listened to this lecture and taken some notes, give a look to page 401, numbers 1 and 7, and see if we can't identify things as Bernoulli trials. And in the next couple lectures, we're going to introduce the two new models that we have to work with that are going to be really helpful to be finding particular probabilities. Please let me know if you have any questions. I hope this helped.